So first of all, welcome to the first Tractor Talk of the 52nd annual Union Thresheree. Today we're featuring this lovely tractor. This is an Eagle tractor. This tractor was manufactured in Appleton, Wisconsin, so it's really local. There's some really cool things about this tractor that we're going to discuss today, what makes it really unique. So to start off with, like I was saying, it was made in Appleton, Wisconsin by the Eagle Manufacturing Company. Because they were made in Appleton and kind of local to this area, this company produced a lot of dairy or forage equipment. One of the most common items that you'll see that hosts the Eagle name is their silo fillers. They're really prevalent in this area. Lots of farmers had them because they were really reliable. So if you see an old silo filler, there's a good chance in this area it's an Eagle sitting on the fence line. This tractor was built around 1917. And I say around 1917 because we don't know the exact year that this tractor was built. This tractor has undergone a little bit of surgery or changes in its lifetime, and that's a part of its heritage, its unique story. So this tractor, when it was originally purchased, it went up to Canada. A lot of our tractors that were made in Wisconsin went up to Canada because we're really close to the border and because they have a lot of farms up there too. So this tractor, when it was purchased, went up to Canada. And just like we purchase a car today, a lot of times we take out a loan or we make payments on that tractor. And that was the case with this tractor because it was very expensive when it was new. The farmer had that tractor and was using it up in Canada, and he probably had it and was using it for about 2 to 3 years approximately when he had that. And then he started defaulting on his loans. So just like it would with a car today, the company had to repossess the tractor. So the farmer did it willingly. He said, okay, you guys can take the tractor back. I can't afford the payments anymore. You can find it at this location. All sounds well and good. However, this time of year was actually the fall, and it was fastly approaching winter. And Farmer Brown forgot to do one critical thing. He forgot to drain the water out of the radiator system. So by the time the tractor company got up to Canada to repossess the tractor and bring it back home, we had already had a hard freeze, which broke the engine block and broke a bunch of things on this tractor. Well, that's really unfortunate for the tractor, but it was going back to the company, so it was no real big deal. They make engines every day. They'll just put a new engine on it and resell the tractor, right? Seems pretty logical. So what makes this tractor really unique is it's an old tractor that has a new engine in it. Now, there's several differences between the engine that's in here now and the original engine that this tractor would have came with. The biggest feature is the governor. This is the governor, and its sole purpose is to control the speed of that engine. Without that, your engine would continuously run faster and faster and faster until eventually it blows itself up. So the governor initially would have been inside this flywheel here and used centrifugal force. It works pretty much the same way, but it was located inside the flywheel. Well, it's been 5 years since that engine was built, so they made a new engine, they made some modifications, and they came out with this idea. They bought a governor. It's a little different, a little bit more reliable, a little bit more sensitive, and made the farmers a lot happier. So because that was what they were producing now, they decided to put this new engine on there. After this tractor went through its modifications, got rebuilt and serviced, it was then resold. Now, luckily for us, this does not happen that often in this day and age. This got sold to a farmer and his 2 brothers up in Clintonville, Wisconsin. So those 3 brothers bought this tractor, a 3-bottom Oliver plow, and then a Fox silo filler. And that was their unit. And they shared that between the 3 farms. Each of them had a small dairy herd, and they would share that rotating throughout the farms. Now, this tractor was passed along and is now on its 4th generation owner. So the great-great-grandson of the person who initially rebought the tractor from the company is now the one that owns this tractor today, and his name is Jeff Schley. So he's the one that did the remarkable restoration on this tractor, and it's a really cool piece. If you look around, there's some really unique features about this tractor, which we're going to discuss. So it was built, like I said, around 1917. It is a 1630 tractor, which means it has 16 horsepower on the drawbar and 30 horsepower on the belt, which is what you'd use as a PTO or to power equipment. So that was its rating from the factory. It weighs 7,200 pounds, so it's pretty heavy, a lot of iron there. and it's a 2-cylinder engine. Now, the pistons on this engine are a little unique. They're simultaneous pistons, which means they run back and forth side by side, and they don't alternate like most 2-cylinder engines. So they just run side by side, and one will fire, then the next revolution another one will fire. So it has a really unique sound when it's running, and you'll hear that in just a moment when we fire it up. The bore and stroke on this engine is an 8-inch bore by 8-inch stroke. So that's, you know, bigger than a coffee can. That's basically a paint can size piston going back and forth. So there's a lot of cubic inches there, which creates a lot of torque. It's a very slow running engine. It has 2 speeds forward, both of them are slow, and 1 reverse. Top speed on this tractor is about 3 miles an hour. So going through this tractor, some of the unique things that we talked about. Radiator, this is pretty conventional, even for what we have today. But the fuel tank will start here. If we notice on this tank, we have 2 gas taps. That's not because we want it accessible, you know, no matter which side of the pump we pull up on. There's actually 2 tanks here. There's a starting tank and then an actual fuel tank, and there's a divider on the inside right here. So this tractor uses 2 different types of fuel and then also burns water. When the farmer first starts it for the day, they're going to start it on gasoline, which back in the day was about 25 cents a gallon, I believe. I have to fact check that, don't quote me. Everything I say is mostly true, sometimes made up. So bear with me. Regardless, gasoline was very expensive back in the day. So farmers didn't want to burn gasoline in their tractors because it costs a lot of money. However, what was more available and really cheap was kerosene. Now, kerosene was a reliable fuel, but it requires certain things to be happening in that engine for it to work properly. Number one, or the most important thing, is temperature. That engine has to be good and hot in order to vaporize and effectively combust kerosene. So to do that, when the engine's cold, it won't start on kerosene very well. So what they would do is they'd have gas in a small tank, and they'd start it up, let it run for 5 minutes, get that engine good and warm. At that point, they would switch it over to kerosene because it was a lot cheaper. In fact, it was half the price per gallon. So if you had that option farming, you'd want to utilize that. So you would switch it over to kerosene and run on that all day. Now, like I said, temperature is the most important thing when it comes to burning kerosene in the engine. Now, you want that engine good and hot, but you can also have it too hot, all right? And what happens then when it's too hot is that kerosene will actually pre-ignite, and you'll get a pinging noise. That's when that gasoline, or that kerosene, is actually exploding before we want it to, and it's actually making you lose horsepower. The easiest way to combat that is to add water to the mix. Now, I know that kind of sounds bizarre, you're putting water into your fuel, but that actually helps cool the engine. Now, that water is located right above the engine in this tank here. So we have our cooling system, we have our gas tank, our fuel tank, and then we also have this water tank, and it's all controlled in the carburetor, which is right in the back by the operator. Now, once we start this up, I want to take a walk around the tractor and just look. There's a lot of moving things here, all right? It's not the safest tractor by OSHA standards, but it gets the job done. Now, as we watch through the years of how tractors progressed, we'll see more and more items on tractors get closed up and sealed off. That wasn't really because of safety, it was more or less to protect the engine. So if we look in the back of the engine, and we can kind of just file around this way, I'll point out some things on our operator's platform here. Sorry, we need to hydrate. All right, so we see these are our rocker arms. This controls the valves of our engine. Notice it's all exposed. And what are we doing throughout the day? We're gradually taking our oil can, we're putting a couple drops of oil there, some oil on there, so it rocks and it works all nice and happy. But what happens when you have oil and you're driving through a dusty field? All that dust gets stirred up, and where does it go? Right where that oil is. So you're basically creating sandpaper or a compound that's wearing out your engine as it goes. So as we progress throughout years, we see more and more of these things being closed up and sealed up as companies became wiser to this fact. Now, one thing that this tractor has that is really unique is their lubrication system. In cars today, we have a sump system. So oil runs through the engine, collects at the bottom, there's a pump, and it recirculates. That's why we get our oil changed every 3,000 miles. Well, on this tractor, at the start of every day, we put fresh oil in, and that happens right up here, there's a little black box here. What this does is this black box is a pump and is powered by this belt. So as we run, it drops just 2 drops of oil in a line, and that goes to each piston. All right? So each piston gets fresh oil each and every time it's brand new. Well, we want to be thrifty. This is hard times. This is early, the early 1900s. We want to be economical with our tractors. So the more we can use that oil, the better off the farmer is. So one way we did that is it drips in, lubricates the pistons. Well, then it collects in the crankcase. We use it again to then lubricate the crankshaft as it splashes in there. But eventually that's going to fill up, because remember, we're putting fresh oil in every day, just continually adding more oil to that engine. It's going to fill up eventually. Well, let's use it one more time. I'll see if I can find an easy way to show you this. Along the side here, we have a little copper tube. And that copper tube is at a level high enough in the engine that there's a little basin for oil to collect, but eventually it's going to get too full, and once that happens, oil can drain out of that tube. Now, some tractor companies, you just pull the plug and let it drain on the ground. They're like, well, we can get one more use out of this oil, we're going to be savvy. This little tube brings the oil and it drips on the gears. So we're oiling the engine in 2 different locations, and then that oil travels down to lubricate our gears as well. But again, if we notice, all exposed gearing. So we put oil on that gear, and then we drive it through the sand and the dust, and then those wear out. So in looking at these tractors right behind us, these are both 30-60 horsepower tractors, and they're about a decade apart. So notice the size difference. This one is a lot smaller, that one's a lot bigger. That one has exposed everything. Everything is out and open to the elements. This one, everything is all closed off. And that's just a quick visual of the changes that happened, because in this time period, there was no cookie cutter recipe to make a tractor. Every company was trying different things. So that's a lot of the cool, we'll say unique features about this tractor. We're gonna do a starting demonstration, but before we do that, does anyone have any questions at all? Oh, we're just describing stuff back there? Awesome. All right, so let's do a starting demonstration. I'll kind of walk you through what it takes to start this tractor. Now, normally when we turn off a tractor like this, a lot of times they don't have kill switches. Now I say that, and this tractor is an exception, it does have a kill switch, but normally it wouldn't. So how you would kill the tractor is to turn off the gas. Now, your gas tank is way up there, your carburetor is way back here. There's a lot of fuel in that line from when you turn it off to the tank. So this tractor can run for 5 minutes before it actually shuts off. And conversely, when you open up that fuel, it takes just as long to fill up that line and fill up that carburetor. So these tractors came with a feature that we use to prime the engine. We pour fuel directly into the engine to give it a kick start and make it a lot easier for us to start. So you're gonna see me doing that in a moment. One other thing that we forgot to discuss is this tractor is powered by a magneto. A magneto is a device that spins and creates electricity for the spark of this tractor. It does not have a battery, it does not have a distributor like our cars or vehicles. We have the little device that has a coil and magnets around it, and it spins and creates an impulse which creates our spark. So we can do some things with that magneto. We can set it so it automatically, I shouldn't say automatically, it creates that spark a little easier. So just to put it into layman's terms, we can flip a switch and it starts a little easier. And you're gonna hear it when I start this tractor, it's gonna be a really slow put, 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 put. And then I'm gonna flip a switch back here and you're gonna hear this engine speed up. So just kind of listen to that. What I'm doing is I'm changing the timing of that spark. So it's going from sparking late in the engine to a little bit earlier, and we're talking milliseconds here. But you'll notice a difference immediately, okay? So that's something that we can adjust, is the timing of the spark, the fuel we discussed, and then priming. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that now. Now with this tractor, I gotta make sure I turn the kill switch off because I often forget that, and then it's a lot of work for me. So to do it, we got these little handy cups up here, provided by the company. You can see them right on the side of the engine. It's just like a little spoon bowl full. You kind of fill that up, let it trickle into the engine, and that's about the right quantity of fuel that you want. So we have our handy dandy starting gas. Fun fact, if you're at a tractor show and you see any type of liquid that's in a water bottle that's not clear, you don't want to drink that, because 9 chances out of 10 it's a gas. So just keep that in mind. That's a little safety tip for the day. All right, so We're gonna come over here and just pour just a little bit of gas in there. Like I said, it's probably about a tablespoon or so. Let that. So that's in one cylinder, and I have the same thing on the other side. So I'm gonna give that side a little bit of gas as well.
Yeah. He's awesome. Yeah. That's my other son.
All right. Now, another thing that this priming cup is doing for me.
Set up all that stuff down in the feature barn.
So there's a little, it's basically a valve, and I opened it up and I poured gas into it. So gas is running into the cylinder. That also means that there's a hole in the cylinder where air can come out when I come to start it. It also works as a decompression, so I can turn that engine over a lot easier. So as soon as I start the engine, you're going to see smoke coming out of here and on the other side. And the first thing you're going to see me do is run around here, and I'm going to close those valves, okay? So when I actually start this thing, I'm going to put down the microphone. You're going to see me do several things. Number one, I'm going to come close these petcocks or these priming cups so you won't see gas coming out. That's going to increase the compression and make the engine run better. Then I'm going to come down and I'm going to flip that switch on that magneto. It's called the impulse, and you're going to hear the tractor speed up. On certain other tractors, we might have to adjust the fuel a little bit. This carburetor is pretty advanced for its time, so the fuel is pretty well set and we just leave it. A tractor like that, we're constantly altering with the carburetor to get the fuel right, but I don't need to do that on this one. So any other questions quick before we start it? There's no such thing as a silly question with this, and if you're asking, a lot of other people probably have the same question. Where do I find all what? All of this information. So you find your local tractor show, and then you find the beer at the local tractor show. And usually around the beer you find a big group of guys that like to sit around and socialize, and you listen. And you do that at an early age, and you hear a lot of good information, you hear a lot of bad information, and then you just cipher it out as you go. But also, your historical societies are a really great resource. So seeing that this tractor was built in Appleton, it's very close to us. There's historical societies all around the state, including Wisconsin Historical Society, that have a really large archives of information on here. So that's one way to start. I currently live in Minneapolis. This year we're featuring Minneapolis Moline. So every Tuesday after work I go to the Historical Society and I read through boxes and boxes and boxes of company records, and you just kind of retain cool and fun facts. Awesome question. Any other questions?
Yeah, when you see everything he's got in that feature barn, and he's got mileage, and I don't know if they've been in there yet.
I haven't.
That's a great question. So the only time you'll really add water to the engine is when you're working it really hard. That's when the engine's the hottest. So it's a matter of sound. You got to use your resources. So as you're using this engine, it's going to be pow, 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 pow. As it gets too warm, that pow will turn into kind of like a bird chirp, where it'll be choo, 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 choo. That's when it's pre-igniting. So it's all a sound thing. Basically what you're doing is you open up that water valve till that sound goes away. It's a very sensory thing. On this tractor, it's very, very distinguishable. Like I know the second it's too warm, and when this tractor is running under full load, you'll be putting in as much water as you are fuel. It'll be a 50-50 mix. Yep. Very good question, but it's very much a sound thing. When you're done working it real hard and you're slowing the engine down, or you no longer have that heavy load on, a lot of times the engine will cool itself and you can take that water out of the mixture. Excellent question. Any other questions?
That's okay, as long as I know where it's at.
All right, cool. Well, our owner of the tractor just showed up. He's in the back. Everyone say hi, Jeff. I get to commandeer his toys every once in a while and play with them. But we're going to go ahead and start this thing up. Now remember, right now I'm setting that magneto, so it's going to sound a little different. So as soon as this thing fires, I'm going to come back, shut the petcocks, and then come over here, and then flip that switch, and you'll hear it speed up. If you listen to that engine, it was very distinct. One piston, then the other. Boom, 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 boom. Just up here. Feel free to walk around, look at all the moving mechanisms. If you have questions, I'll be standing here. I'll be happy to answer them. We do have some pamphlets over here. My lovely assistant is handing them out. So if you'd like some information on this tractor, be sure to check that out. Thank you, everyone.